of Allen and Unwin and Gary's publisher Annette Barlow, I'd like to warmly welcome you all to this wonderful celebration of Gary Bryson's debut novel, Turtle. Tonight we are very lucky to have Phillip Adams to officially launch Turtle for us. Phillip, of course, needs no introduction, and many of you will already be aware that Gary was Phillip's executive producer for many years. So here we have Phillip Adams in conversation with Gary Bryson.
Before we start, I want to give everyone here a gist of what this extraordinary book is about. Turtle, set in Glasgow, partly in the 70s, partly now. The story of Donald Pinelli, an Italo-Scot and his very mad family of psychics, crooks, and spiteful siblings. Donald's mother, Trixie, believes that Donald is cursed to die by drowning on his 18th birthday, but his real curse is to be burdened by a mum who is clinically depressed and incapable of love, and by a father whose absence borders on the pathological. And young Donald deals with all this by befriending, yes, a turtle in the local zoo, a hapless reptile, which he imbues with all kinds of attributes, including a Glasgow accent and a gruff nature. After various setbacks, the turtle saves Donald from drowning. He escapes his family on his 18th birthday. 30 years later, he turns up for Trixie's funeral, hoping to finally lift the curse that he's lived with all his life. Okay, let's deal with this autobiographical thing. Donald is absolutely clearly you, isn't he?
Well, Phillip, to my knowledge, I have never spoken to a turtle in my life. And the answer really is no, Donald is not me. Donald is a fictional creation. And I say that to all my family too.
Say the rest of the family can't sue you for libel.
When I rang my father and said, oh, I'm having a book published, he said, well, that's good. He said, what's it about? I said, well, it's about growing up in a dysfunctional family in the 1970s. He said, oh, he said, am I in it? And, well, I had to think about it then, because yes, he is in it, but no, he's not. You know, I mean, the father in Turtle is far worse than my father could ever have been, and same with the mother.
In the same line of business, though, isn't he?
In the same line of business.
Same heat of ethnicity.
There are similarities, and he will recognise parts of himself, but it's definitely not him.
Are you therefore the turtle?
Am I the turtle? Well, that's a good question too, because I could be the turtle. I like turtles very much.
You've never spoken to one, but you like them?
No.
On principle?
On principle, in principle, yeah, definitely. So no, I'm not the turtle either. Donald, the young Donald, latches onto this vision of a turtle as his means of escape, because it's really something that is alien to his environment. It's about as far away from Glasgow as you can possibly think of getting. So, but when he imagines this turtle as a saviour, he's constrained by his own cultural upbringing. So he imagines a Scottish turtle, a Glaswegian turtle. It speaks to him the way people speak to him in a Glasgow accent. And you know, in a way, it's not so far-fetched. The turtle, although it seems like as far away from Glasgow as you could possibly imagine, the turtle is actually an animal which, you know, has survived through having hiding behind a big hard shell, and you know, Glaswegians do the same. We're talking about fact and fiction, and what is the difference between fact and fiction? And I think you can actually get to the facts of matters fictionally better than you can factually in many ways. The crux of Turtle is actually a book about family relationships, and I'm trying to say something about what happens when family relationships go wrong. And it's about dysfunctional families. Now, I mean, the idea that the family can be a space for madness is one that's been put forward by a number of theorists. Most of us here probably wouldn't think of our families as being mad spaces, but we might recognize the difficulties that we face in trying to connect with parents, with siblings, in the kind of arguments we have, and how we negotiate love around all that sort of stuff.
Is it as difficult as keeping a team together for a Radio National chat show?
It's much more difficult, because no one's getting paid for it.
Families have to do it for free.
They have to do it for free, that's right. So the thing is that when you look at the way relationships can go wrong in a family, they can be really, really explosive. And you know, Algie Lang talks about, you know, this violence of love. He talks about love in the family as a violent thing, and I can recognize that. For me, one of the central questions of life is how we relate to each other and how we fail to relate to each other. When dysfunctional families have problems with relationships, what gets lost is the experience of being loved and learning the ability to love in return. And that's what happens to Donald in the book. He's raised in a family without love. He lives his life not knowing how to love in return, and that's what he's searching for, and hopefully that's where it resolves by the time it ends.
And like almost all of us, there's an isolated or solitary smile in his life. In this case, from a girl he sees, well, he knows as a child. She smiles at him once, and he's haunted by that smile forever. In fact, it comes back in the last page, the last sentence in the book.
The character of Anna McCall it represents hope in the novel. In what is it? I mean, I hope a funny novel, but it's also quite bleak in many ways. But in this bleakness, she represents a future hope for Donald. And he meets her again at his mother's funeral 30 years later, and that's where the hope comes, I think.
Since you metamorphosised into a turtle and swam to Australia and got a job at the ABC, is this a Glasgow book or an Australian book or an expatriate book?
Turtle's a migrants novel. It's a book about escaping Glasgow. It's about escaping that angry culture. And it's about not escaping it because you don't ever quite escape the Glasgow in your head.